we are sick to death of conservatives like Peter Hitchens or, infamously, last week, Ben Shapiro, giving us the solution of Denethor from the film adaptation of Return of the King, because he's very different from the books. Basically, abandon your posts, men of Minas Tirith, and at the same time, open your doors and let the orcs in. Because Peter Hitchens suggests that while you, young, enterprising Englishmen, should flee your ancestral homelands because all is lost, Britain should bring back Shamima Begum and give her a fair trial. Thereby meaning the British taxpayer should pay for her witness protection as she waits on remand, they should pay for her trial, they should pay for her inevitable prison cell, and for her ability to attend mosque and eat meals while in prison. If you don't remember the ISIS bride in question, Shamima Begum took skipping school a little bit more seriously than Greta Thunberg, and she and two others left Britain, where she was born in Bethnal Green, to go to Syria to join ISIS. She married a Dutch convert to Islam, had 3 children, none of whom survived their life under the hot sun in the Syrian desert, and did what all girls do and joined the Sharia enforcement police, ensuring that women were wearing hijabs, stitching suicide vests together, and bearing witness to beheadings. But now, don't worry, she recognised that being a part of ISIS was no longer a good idea, and so she sat down for an interview with ITV, no longer dressed like one of those spinning head things in the Doctor Who episode from the library, and was wearing perfectly Western clothing, straightened hair, makeup, and said, well, I didn't do anything wrong, except for join ISIS. So, Shamima Begum has since been rotting in a refugee camp full of fellow ISIS fighters, about 30,000 people in total, in Syria, ever since former Home Secretary Sajid Javid, a man who was totally apathetic in 2021 to white Britons becoming a minority in their own major cities, saying, so what, when Nigel Farage pointed this out. But Sajid Javid did one sensible thing, and he revoked Shamima Begum's British citizenship, because Begum is actually eligible, per Bangladeshi law, for citizenship in Bangladesh by blood. And so, by revoking her citizenship, she was not left hypothetically stateless. This was challenged, of course, in the UK domestic courts. It was kicked up to the High Court, who upheld the ruling, and the Supreme Court refused to hear her appeal. So, the UK has precedent to repeal the citizenships of not just first generation, but second and even third generation immigrants, by virtue of them being eligible for citizenship somewhere else, if their continued presence in our country is not conducive to the public good. If they commit crimes, if they join terror groups, or, if a government were sufficiently courageous, if they turn our major towns and cities into the failed third world slums that their parents and grandparents fled. They are not conducive to the public good, they shouldn't be here, and Shamima Begum provides us with that precedent. But, last week, a so-called independent report published by the Independent Commission on UK Counter-Terrorism said that after a 3-year review, she and other British nationals in the camp should be repatriated. Now, this has already secretly happened, according to the journalist who had interviewed Begum before. One of the 2 members of a female terror cell called the Terror Twins has been quietly returned to Britain. We don't know where she is, we don't know whether or not she's in prison, whether or not she's awaiting trial, whether or not she's walking the streets. The government did this without informing the public. They unleashed a violent jihadist on our streets without telling us. So for all we know, Shamima Begum could be brought back without our know-so. And this could potentially undo the precedent set by Sajid Javid depriving her of her citizenship, making it much harder for a future government to denaturalise and deport first, second, and third generation immigrants that are not conducive to the public good. Now, the members of this commission include Dominic Grieve, the former Conservative Attorney General, who has currently been overseeing the Labour government's attempt to implement an Islamophobia definition, and who signed off on the previous all-party parliamentary group definition of Islamophobia, of which his co-commission partner, Saeed Avorsi, is a member, which said that criticising the Pakistani grooming gangs is an example of racism and Islamophobia. It defined Islamophobia as a type of racism rooted in racism that targets Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. It's basically the Muslim equivalent to the what is a woman definition offered in Matt Walsh's film. Saeed Avorsi as well, remember, was the former chair of the Conservative Party, left over their handling of Palestine, accused the party of Islamophobia, wrote a book titled Why Muslims Don't Matter, accusing the entire country of being Islamophobic, and Her chief of staff, Richard Chalk, was the head of Raiku, the Home Office's Don't Look Back in Anger department, which busses imams out to the sites of terror attacks to take photos and controls the front pages of newspapers anytime a jihadist blows up a pop concert. They tell the British public, don't blame Islam for Islamic terror attacks. So, excuse me if I don't think these people are independent either of ideology or of government, given they used to be a part of the government that inflicted these atrocities, including accommodating jihadists on the British public. So I think Shamima Begum should either be left to rot in the Syrian desert, or if this creates a problem for the Trump administration, and the reason that this refugee camp, this terror cell camp, is being broken up is because the Trump administration, in its negotiations with Syria's new ex-jihadist leader, wants the camp to be removed and to negotiate with the Kurds so that the Syrian president in question can get jurisdiction over all of North Syria, and presumably the Americans can access its lucrative oil fields in that area. This is also the reason, by the way, why Nigel Farage floated the idea of returning Shamima Begum back to Britain, because in conversations with the administration, they had said they need the camp closed. If this creates a problem for negotiations, then let's reach a compromise and drone strike Shamima Begum into a fine red mist in the Syrian desert, because she has already admitted to fleeing our country, abandoning the values and protections of Western Christendom, and wanting a violent revolutionary overthrow to install a caliphate in Britain. No thank you, you don't belong back, you are an enemy combatant, and I have no sympathy. But you know who does have sympathy for Shamima Begum? Peter Hitchens, who has constantly provided quite insightful assessments of what has gone wrong in Britain, but anytime you ask him to prescribe a solution, he tells you, as he did me, to read a column that he wrote in 2003 when I was 5, and that it's all too far gone, and actually, you should just flee for your lives. You wonder why this brand of boomer conservatism is so off-putting to young men like me who have only ever grown up in the aftermath of Blair's demographic and cultural and constitutional revolutions, and have inherited a heterogeneous country and had their nose rubbed firmly in diversity. You wonder why we're more interested in getting things done than preserving the institutions which have betrayed us and ruined our country. The genesis of this segment was an exchange that I had with Hitchens after he responded to my former Lotus Eaters colleague, Bo Dade, saying, anyone advocating for Shamima Begum to return to Britain as a fifth columnist, and that includes Peter Hitchens. And Hitchens said, heaven protect you from falling into the hands of people like you. Mercy is one of the greatest virtues. Justice is a fundamental requirement of humanity. Shamima Begum has not been tried or convicted. It is not a fundamental requirement of humanity because justice and mercy are valued particularly by Christianity and individualistic English culture. Clannish Islamic societies with high levels of cousin marriage and the enclaves that they've established in our countries, like the Bengali slum that is Bethnal Green, Peter, do not value justice and mercy outside of that which advantages themselves, their families, their clans, and their honours. So, extending undue moral consideration and grace to enemy combatants, particularly Islamic terrorists, is a strategy for civilizational suicide. And no, Bo is not being unfair when withdrawing that moral consideration from Shamima Begum, who absconded from our civilization, declared war against it, and therefore is not afforded our grace and privileges. You would not continue to pay monopoly money to someone who flipped over the board, or is stealing from the bank. So I responded by saying Begum should be a fine red mist in the middle of a barren desert, that we should extend the same consideration to her as ISIS do to our people, and we should use the precedent set by her case to denaturalize and deport more people who hate us. And Peter thought this was immoral. He says, you think she should be murdered without trial. She has already admitted to being a member of ISIS, Peter. That is a confession. That is sufficient. And he says, what exactly is it you think we were defending against ISIS, Al-Qaeda, etc.? And have you ever seen the body of a violently killed person? I think we should be willing to use lethal force to defend our civilization and our families. I will not cry any tears of grief over any enemy combatants who would like to harm my civilization, destroy my family and my way of life, getting their just comeuppance. And what do I think we're defending against ISIS and Al-Qaeda? Christendom. England. My inheritance, which I want to pass off to my children. And you know what doesn't allow me to do that? Leaving my country and living in exile while bringing back foreign terrorists to stand trial and be housed at the expense of the British taxpayer. The British taxpayer's that you are encouraging to leave their ancestral homeland. Basically, hollowing out England from within of its population who sustain its culture, and at the same time encouraging terrorists to come back. Opening the doors of Minas Tirith, allowing the orcs to pour in, while telling the men of Gondor to abandon their posts and flee for their lives. And so I pointed this out to him, that absconding from Britain to be betrothed to an ISIS fighter is enough for her to be vaporized. The Christian civilization we should defend against hordes of cousin-marrying, child-abusing jihadists affords universal moral consideration to innocent people. She is not innocent because she joined ISIS. If you reject that civilization, if you take up arms against it, then as a matter of self-defense, you shouldn't be granted its protections. Giving grace without repentance debases the currency of forgiveness. Remember, repent, go and sin no more. Repentance is the precondition to forgiveness in the Bible. She hasn't repented, she just wants to come back and evade the consequences of her actions. Joining ISIS. I am very comfortable in the violence it requires to enforce this standard. Peter responded by saying, "It's clear you do not accept the Christian Gospels as a basis for morality except when it suits you, and you reject the rule of law. What is it, then, that you think you are defending? I am not defending laws which unilaterally exploit our people and give protections to our existential enemies, Peter. And yes, I am abiding by the biblical principles of Imago Dei. I am abiding by the standards of using violence in self-defense as set forth by not only the Gospels, with Christ clearing the temple of money changers, using a whip, and also saying that those who lead little ones astray better tie a millstone to their neck and drown themselves in the sea than try to enter the kingdom of heaven, because they are not welcome there. But also, there are a lot of Old Testament standards of justice which we can debate the merits of. You'd be hard-pressed to argue that killing an enemy that is trying to wipe out your people is not in keeping with what the Israelites were doing for hundreds of years in the desert. Yes, there is a biblical foundation for my demand that the moral ledger be rebalanced when there is a deficit. And we should not allow people who want to destroy our civilization and turn it into a caliphate to come back and be afforded the benefits of not just the permissive British justice system, but taxpayer subsidies so they can continue to sit in a mosque in prison as if they've not actually done something grievously wrong to our country. And so I responded, saying, the Gospels don't demand we extend limitless moral consideration to jihadists who reject the divinity of Christ, the universal dignity of the innocent human person, and declare us all to be infidels who must either convert or die. The rule of law only matters insofar as the law is just. Any law that requires we be stuck forever with foreign terrorists who hate us is not one worth respecting. Peter responded, the Gospels say that we are all made in the image of God and infinitely precious to him. You should at least hesitate before endorsing any act of violence and cruelty and wonder if you are justified. And the people who reject that principle, who reject that God, who reject the foundations upon which Blackstone's formulation and English common law rests, should not be afforded its protections. They are unwilling to affirm that truth, and so, when people tell you who they are, I believe them. If you don't believe in free speech, I don't think you should speak. If you don't believe in my civilization, I don't think you should be afforded all its graces and protections. Peter also responded with part 2 saying, big noisy men shouting bravely on the internet for the limitless punishment of a lone woman do not remind me very strongly of Christ. That lone woman is a member of ISIS, Peter. Said lone women have also been terrorists in the UK. One was just prosecuted and demanded to have her mugshot retaken because she wasn't wearing a hijab. In 2010, one stabbed, I think it's Stephen Timms, who was then and now a Labour MP, who for some reason still went to Muslim Council of Britain events, despite them being run by the Muslim Brotherhood, according to a 2015 government report. So, no, I'm not a big, noisy man shouting bravely on the internet. Well, I probably am, to be honest. But I'm not just advocating the arbitrary and limitless punishment of a lone woman. I'm saying that we should take out enemy combatant ISIS fighters, or at the very least denaturalize and deport them, before bringing them back and housing them at taxpayers' expense. And so I pointed out that he thinks we should bring back Shamima Begum, but his advice to young British men is, quote, I've stopped giving advice. The one piece of advice I ever gave about British politics was to leave the country if you're young enough to start a new life, and that has been so misinterpreted that I can't be bothered to offer even that anymore. Okay, so either flee for your lives, or bring back and house terrorists with your tax money and shut up and accept the fact that your civilization is in terminal decline. Actually, no, Peter. It might make me a big, noisy man shouting on the internet, but I'm not actually willing to accept defeat. I want to do something to ensure that the country that I want to grow old in and raise children in, that my family helped physically build by laying brick walls all across the southeast of England, I want to ensure that that country still exists, that is still something akin to the waning high trust society that I had the luck to grow up in for a little while, and that you definitely grew up in. I want there to be a nice, peaceful, and prosperous country for your children and your grandchildren to live in, Peter. And excuse me if I haven't given up yet. Excuse me if I think that you shouldn't insult young men who want to do something about the fact that their country is filled with foreign criminals who hate them and want to turn their country into a third world slum. So Peter responded, saying, I've said nothing about Miss Begum's housing. The logical consequence of bringing her back and giving her a trial is that if she's convicted, she would be in a prison at our expense, Peter. But I see a yelling mob demanding the humiliation of a lone person. I know where I stand. I was brought up to be British. No, we are not the Pharisees demanding that we crucify Christ and release Barabbas. We are not. Because she is not innocent, she is a member of ISIS. And so we should not have her in this country. We should instead use the standard that she set to denaturalize and deport people like her and return to that high trust, culturally and ethnically homogeneous country that you enjoyed growing up in, Peter. And you documented the fall of, for many years, commendably, in books like The Abolition of Britain, but have done nothing practical to stop. Because remember, at the last election, Peter Hitchens said we should still vote Conservative, despite saying the Conservative Party are institutionally, morally irredeemable and have ruined the country. So, at the last moment, at the 11th hour, when the Conservative Party could have been destroyed, Peter Hitchens steps in and tries to save it. Yet again, does nothing to stop the destruction of the country that he recognises is happening, and if anything, decides to make it worse by bringing back terrorists and telling you to leave. So Peter ended with, okay, justice costs money, we spend far more on less necessary things. Okay, so you admit it's a choice, Peter. I think we should make the choice to denaturalise and deport people like Shamima Begum. I think we shouldn't bring her back. I think we shouldn't spend any money on the foreign enclaves that are making our country a hostile and unfamiliar place. I think we should make a set of different choices. And I don't think the fact that I'm advocating those choices to make my country a better place warrants scorn. Because the attitude with people like Peter is, well, I've been complaining about this for years, as a big noisy man in the newspapers. Nobody listened, and I'm gonna die soon anyway, so what do I care? I care, actually, Peter. I care about the country that my children, God willing, will inherit, will have to live in. I care about the mess that the previous generations have made. I want to do something about it, not just listen to Denethor, abandon my posts, and allow the white city of Gondor to fall.